We've dealt with all of it over the last 10 years. We've released about 20,000 pieces of content on the internet, and we're going to tell you today how individual creators can deal with trolls and haters. We've got a bunch of methods that work, how media corporations deal with haters and trolls really effectively, and if somebody makes a physical threat to you or somebody you know, we've got an insane story about a top hip-hop artist. There was a gun involved. They actually showed up with the gun. Threats on social media. We've dealt with the highest level threats that are legitimate, and we're going to tell you all today how to deal with these haters. Stop the haters. Let's go. This podcast is sponsored by Restream. Why live stream to one platform when you can simultaneously live stream to every platform to discover new audiences faster using Restream.io?
So before we even get into how to really deal with trolls, we do need to talk about the seriousness of death threats that come. And when you hit a certain level, or even if you don't hit a certain level, you may come across this. And a story that we have that we dealt with, it's probably 4 or 5 years ago at this point. There was a major concert in Texas. We're not going to give any company or artist names, by the way. A major concert in Texas that a company that we were doing social media work for had put together. And on about a couple days before the concert actually took place, I noticed that on our Instagram page, the company's Instagram page, somebody had made a threat to come to the concert and shoot this particular artist. And we took this to higher ups, and they said, "Yeah, just trolls, Don't worry about it." We didn't take that to heart. We ended up calling the local police department and telling them about the entire situation. And sure enough, somebody showed up with a gun, and they had to cancel the entire concert. So the whole message behind this is, when it comes to death threats, there's really never a scenario where you shouldn't take it seriously. And unfortunately, it may be something that as a creator you come across. You immediately need to contact the proper authorities, especially if it's in a private message, especially if they're listing off names of family, if they have any information on you whatsoever. Just you have to take it seriously. So that's the story that we were talking about, guys. You remember that? That was... Yeah.
I've got one too, similar to that. For another company I worked for, there were people that were making like very specific death threats against the office of a company I worked for. And I remember I spoke to you, Ross, about it to ask your advice on how to handle this as well. And the policy on hate. So the point of telling you this at the beginning of the podcast, there are internet trolls and haters, and then there are people that make threats. And so we want to make that distinction at the beginning of the podcast. If somebody makes a physical threat, you call the police. Without question, there's no scenario where you let it slip. There's no scenario where you let it go. You just call the police and you give them the information. And a lot of police departments now actually have officers, detectives on board, and they're starting to do training and what have you to help these officers understand how to do research on social media and actually go deal with these threats. And they can actually piece together, like looking at somebody's Twitter account, triangulating with their Facebook and some comments they made here and a geotag there, and they can actually figure out who these people are and knock. They're knocking on their door and be like, "Hey, was this you?" And they hold up their phone and they show the threat on the phone. Like, that happens, call the police. So that's the distinction we want to make at the beginning. Thanks for sharing that, Ross. I think you guys should always do that when it comes to haters. So taking it a level down from death threats, let's take it to the haters and trolls range now. How do you stop the haters and the trolls? And Perrin, you've done PR messaging and corporate messaging for megacorps, and they have this like ice cold approach to haters and to trolls sometimes that is insanely effective, that we want to share with all the creators out there that are listening right now, because there's something you can learn from it, right?
So one of the most effective strategies that I would help companies employ versus haters and trolls, and a lot of them don't like to hear this strategy because it sounds like, as working with their PR team or being head of their social media, it sounds like I'm really lazy. But I just say, don't do anything. Just ignore it. That's the strategy. The strategy is just ignore it. And this makes sense psychologically versus trolls and haters, because they are coming and spewing hate online and one of the main things they're doing this is because they're trying to elicit any sort of response out of you. Because by responding, you validate whatever they're saying, pretty much in any case whatsoever. If they're saying they hate you for X, Y, see a reason, and you respond to that, you validate it. You make their opinion valid, and you make them heard, because now they know that you heard it, and that was the main goal. Was they wanted you to know, and they wanted you to hear the hateful thing they had to say. So the second part is, normally from a business perspective, saying anything at all, there's a really high chance they'll fumble the response because they're just not very good at social media PR messaging. They're good at corporate PR messaging through old school means, but in today's landscape where it's a lot more informal, they normally mess up and say something that ends up digging themselves a deeper hole, because they're not in the trenches. They don't quite understand how the conversations actually go. So just better for them to not be a part of it. So one of the most successful strategies versus haters and trolls is just ice cold ignore it and don't let it affect you. And even the companies I've worked for would have so much trouble with this, because I would tell them,
so hard to do. How do you ignore that person that's trying to incite you, right?
Yeah, and then someone else in the company would report it and say, like, hey, start talking to the CEO, maybe say, hey, did you see this? We should do something about this. And then the CEO would come back down after we'd already determined the PR strategy and be like, hey, should we do something about this? And we'd be like, no, yeah, the strategy is to ignore it. The strategy is to not engage with it, not engage. Eventually, I would get the companies on the page where, yes, not engaging works. It generally works. And when you do it over and over and over again, it really pushes trolls away, because they know that you're not going to respond, because they see other trolls making posts and there's just no engagement on it, and there's no reaction, and no one gives a shit about them. That's what makes it work, is that when they throw out their loud voice out there, no one fucking cares. And when that happens, they don't keep doing it. So that strategy works for businesses. That's not necessarily the strategy, though, that will work for creators. So,
well, I'm going to hit pause button there before you go into that next part, because you're going to talk about another strategy that could work for creators. I don't agree, but I know what you're going to say next. You're going to say, kill them with kindness. Throw some honey and throw some sprinkles and sparkles out there, and everybody will. No, I know that's not what you're going to say, but I want to double down on that, and I want to tell you guys, if you have a hard time emotionally dealing with haters and trolls and people coming at you on the internet, it's okay to uninstall a social media app. I just uninstalled YouTube creator app myself, as a guy that does this for a living. I don't want to look at the YouTube comments anymore, because I have a hard time emotionally dealing with the 1 in 20 comments that's a troll. So I just got rid of it. I cut it out, and I feel great, and my business hasn't suffered at all as a result. Some of my other clients that are full-time, they make maybe in like the tens of thousands of dollars range as full-time creators. Their policy is ban, block, mute, and fuck you. That's their policy. And I at first I tried to tell them, why don't you kill them with kindness or blah, blah, blah. And then I realized over time, as you scale up as a creator, as your audience gets bigger and bigger and bigger as a creator, it becomes more and more difficult to respond to everyone. And so one way that you can deal with haters at scale, which is why Mega Media Corps do this, is just to ignore them, to block them, to ban them, and then to never worry about them ever again. So it's a very valid strategy, but to your point, it is one tool in the tool belt that you should have available to you, and isn't the only tool, and it's not necessarily the best tool for all situations. So I'll kick it back to you, Perrin, to talk about what those other tools might be. And Ross, I know you have some input on this as well. So what do you, go ahead, Perrin.
Yeah, so I think if you are smaller to medium sized, there are strategies that you can take haters and trolls and actually convert them to be brand advocates, like really, really strong brand advocates. And one of my clients, he's a top tier YouTuber. He's a music YouTuber. He does this reliably still, even as a top talent, very, very successfully. And he still will personally do this. He has a strategy where he can see all comments across all of his brand. And particularly when he sees a hater, he just goes in there and says the nicest possible thing he says. And you would be surprised how quickly that hater goes from, I fucking hate this guy, to, oh crap, I kind of like this dude now. I kind of like this guy. Now, it takes some practice on what to say, because you have to be able to respond not out of being affected by the hateful comment itself. You have to be able to separate yourself and be on the outside and be above it and comment back. So it takes some emotional control. It takes some discipline to be able to do a strategy like this. Another way you can respond if you don't have a ton of haters and it's not particularly like super hateful. A common thing is like, "Oh my God, you're such a noob at this game," right? This is for gamers. You're going to see this whenever you're playing terribly or something's happening and you're just getting owned in a game, and then
or just generally like you suck at whatever you're doing is a classic troll thing, right?
Right. Just if you are kind of playing terribly and sucking, own it. Like this is what I'll do, because most of the time I know when I'm playing terrible. I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm doing so badly right now," and someone will be like, "Ashel, you're such a noob." I'm like, "I know, I am noobing it the hell up, aren't I?" And they're like,
right.
They're like, "Oh yeah, you kind of are. You agree with me. Oh, I guess I guess we were of the same mind. I guess I can relate to you a little bit. I'm going to keep watching." Right. So you can change things around if you're able to be self-critical in a way that's not hurtful to yourself. But if you understand criticism and constructive criticism, you can change trolls' behavior around in a satirical way, in a sarcastic way, or just in a constructive way, and put it back onto them as though you agree with them and their assessment, and if it is actually accurate. And now, if you're like dominating or whatever you're doing, like, "Wow, you really suck," their comment's not going to hold anyway, because obviously to everybody else you're dominating whatever you're doing. But that's one way in which I've been able to convert trolls who, and this also really helps my viewing experience, because a lot of people will come in looking for stellar gameplay, but instead I convert them due to a great personality. That way the skill level of the gameplay doesn't matter anymore. So there's a lot of pros to that strategy, but it requires some practice. Like I said, you have to be able to take a step back and not be emotionally attached to what someone says about you on the internet. And I found that as we age and get older, that's easier. But when you're younger, if you're in your teenage years or if you're lower 20s, it's probably going to affect you emotionally a lot more. And it might be more difficult to do that strategy. So
everything affects you emotionally when you're in your teens and early 20s. I mean, I was the same way. So it's almost impossible to ignore when you're young.
It's really hard to do that strategy when you're younger. So I would just say ignore it when you're younger. Now, do we want to talk about, if this is affecting you emotionally? Let's say that someone is continuing to get on your videos and they're continuing to say hateful things, and it is starting to wear on you. It is starting to make you feel worse. Ross, is there another solution here? Not just outside of just banning. What can we do for our own mental health in those type of situations?
Well, if it's affecting you that much, I think for your own sanity, just ban or block them. But going back to what you said earlier, number one, with all this said, the number one thing that I think that you need to get into a pattern of doing is what parents said, and that's just ignoring it. Number two, take a look at this from and this is where online communication really fouls a lot up. We've all sat there and we've all watched streams. So you all know what it's like to be a streamer. We watch streamers, like people are watching you, parent, people are watching you, AWOL, because they feel some kind of connection to you. So when people are saying, "Oh, you suck," and all of that stuff, understand that a lot of the time that's coming from a friendship angle. They're talking to you as a friend. They tune into you because they see you as a friend, even though you don't know who they are and what they're doing. So remember that a lot of times they're just saying these things because, well, for one, a lot of people are generally, especially nowadays, lonely. There's not a lot of friendships, and or you're not allowed to, or you can't really spend a lot of time with friends. So when these situations come up and they say something that could be horrible, a lot of times it's just because that is how generally two good friends react with each other. I mean, we get on here every morning. We joke with each other. I mean, we're all calling each other names and stuff like that. If we didn't know each other, that'd be a whole different conflict of interest there. However, from the perspective of a streamer, it's a one-sided street. They see it that way. They see you as a friend. They see you as somebody that they can joke around and do that stuff with. Now, obviously, there's a limit to what you can take. If somebody's jumping in your DMs and sending you, horrible stuff, then obviously that's a whole nother case. The way that I typically take the kill them with kindness routine with them. When I get DMs, I literally got one last night saying that I deserve to be shot for one of my opinions, and I deleted it.
Yikes.
But typically, it was because I said I had FIFA I was talking about FIFA. Nobody likes FIFA apparently. Anyway,
threats over FIFA.
Yeah, it's getting serious. But typically in cases like that where people come at you from that angle, I typically, the first thing I do is I go and look at their profile and I go and look at their responses to other people. And I look to see how out of line is it. If it doesn't appear to be out of line, I typically talk to the person. I typically write back either like LOL, yeah, and then I ask them a question. What do you actually think about this? I actually take the time to actually show interest in them personally, and then the conversation completely clears up. I've done this with several people over the past 6 years that I still talk to on a weekly basis on the internet now, because it's people that are just looking for that companionship, and the only way that they know how to get your attention for that companionship is to say something that is going to get your attention and cause an emotional reaction. That's how humans work. It doesn't make it right, but a lot of cases that is what is going on here.
Yeah, so one thing that you're going to have to balance here with what Ross is talking about, if you're going to put the time and the energy and all of that effort into maybe trying to convert a troll into a follower or just deal with them because you can't ignore them, that is time that you're spending not creating content. That's time you're spending not with your family. That's time you're spending not exercising and taking care of yourself. That's time you're spending on some rando on the internet that maybe they turn out to be an ally for you, maybe not. And so I take a very different view from Ross on this. Ross has, I think, a bit more compassion than me. Just in general, he's like more of a lovey-dovey teddy bear guy. And I used to be that way when I was younger, in my teens and early 20s. Anytime anybody had a problem in life, I was like the guy that was there, like talking about it with them, asking them all these questions, almost being a therapist about it, which is probably why I'm a coach today. But what I noticed is that every time I had these interactions with people, and you guys watching the podcast probably can relate to this, you give up a part of yourself. You give up a part of your energy. You only have like so much energy every day to spend. And when you use it on randoms on the internet, there's a low probability that that's going to benefit you. And so when I do a calculation for, trying to make it on the internet, trying to build your online business and trying to get what you need and what your family needs in life, spending time trying to fix or trying to work with random assholes on the internet, to me, is a waste of time. I understand it can work out sometimes, but my personal recommendation is just to ban, block, or mute them, or uninstall the app and move on. Because that you only got 10 energy bars a day. If you spend one of those energy bars on something like that, or two, it could even ravage you throughout the rest of the day and do damage over time to your psyche, to your energy, and like you could be thinking about that interaction all day. Somebody that works for me came to me yesterday and described one of those experiences. Somebody came into his Twitter feed and told him, something that was wrong about being a content creator. He tried to explain to him the right strategy, and the guy just wouldn't listen, and it bothered him for an entire day. It just destroyed his productivity as well on some level. And he had to go then talk to me about it, which then hurt my productivity. And so whenever you engage with negative people being negative, it has a ripple effect on your life and everyone around you. And so I would I would recommend, unless you're really good at this, and some of you guys are posting in the comments here, Pit Boss Pat, thanks to the casino industry, he has no feelings. That's great. And also, who was it that said this comment a moment ago? And Jacob Daly is saying, or Dale is saying, thanks to the military, I have no emotions. So I get it. So maybe you've been hardened by life and maybe you're an older person and you can handle it. But I think the average person is actually wasting their time engaging with trolls. That's just my personal opinion on the matter. That's it. And so what other thoughts do you guys have on this? Do we have any other advice to give people to deal with internet haters and trolls?
I wanted to just go back real quick to, the response part. And let's go back to the ice cold strategy for a second of not responding at all. That strategy is the best strategy, but it's also the hardest because it's really, really difficult to not respond. And you'll see this on the internet all the time. You'll see this on Twitter all the time. When someone puts out this really, flamboyant, sensational take that's troll, and people can't help but respond to it because we are reactionary by nature, especially when it comes to social media. And trolls are good at eliciting reactions, and they get better and they get better and they get better at doing so. But the most important thing is to not react to it, despite how hard that will be. So I want to come back and center on that. Do what you can do to not react to it whatever. Do whatever you need to do to just like move on past it and forget about it as quickly as you possibly can. Because the whole point of, if you've ever tried to be a troll, if you've ever put yourself in the mind of a troll, the whole reason they're doing it again is to get a reaction out of you. They want to, and they want to know, they want the satisfaction of knowing they got you to react. So the thing is, any response at all tells them that they get what they want. If you don't give them what they want, they actually will give up, or they'll at least go elsewhere to try to do it. So despite it being very difficult, and the businesses I've worked with, I mean, even the most professional of professionals really struggled with this, to not react. They wanted to react so bad. They just want to say something. They just really want to put that troll in his place. They just really know the right perfect thing to say to just put that troll in his place. Now, it doesn't matter what you say. No, anything that you say in return will acknowledge, validate them, and give them exactly what they want. So there is no perfect response except for not responding at all and not reacting to it at all. In my opinion, that's the best strategy. It's the one that I always recommend to every business that I work for, because it reliably works 100% of the time. But it is one of the most difficult ones to do. So don't beat yourself up if you struggle with it at first. Practice it. Practice doing whatever you need to do to harden yourself to it and to move on very quickly. And I think you'll find that trolls eventually won't even be a problem for you.
Ross, there's this application out there, or this software that you can subscribe to that allows you to actually view all the comments across all platforms. Have you heard of it? And it allows you to block users on all platforms using some sort of technology. I think it rhymes with Restream. We're sponsored by Restream, and I'm looking at Restream chat right over here right now. And there was actually a troll, or there's a spammer that showed up today to try to sell me free followers and clicks. And you know how easy it was with Restream to block that user permanently? One click.
Was it a good deal?
It looked like a good deal. It was in Arabic, so it probably was pretty inexpensive because I have US dollars. But Ross, can you tell them a little bit about how they can get Restream? And it allows you to look at all chats at the same time and do some moderation features there too, which makes it easy, because we're getting comments on YouTube, on Facebook, on Periscope, all at the same time right now. How can you manage all of that? It's Restream. Tell them about it, Ross.
It's actually super, super simple, AWOL. Number one, obviously, the link, if you're watching live, I just tossed the link in the comments. If you're watching the replay, go down and click in the description. You can find a link to sign up. What Restream does to make it super simple is they actually have a separate app that is just for their chat. And you can pull it up. It kind of accumulates all the chats from all the different platforms. Like AWOL said, we've got them coming in from Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Trovo, all of them at the same time. It's one screen, and then you can either reply to all of them at the same time, or you can even just click a button and go to each individual platform to reply to each individual person. It's so easy. It's so simple, and they make it super simple by doing this. So go get your Restream.
I just showed it on the screen for everybody over your face. All that chat in your face. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Internet haters and trolls, everything that's in your tool belt, ignore them, block them, ban them. Kill them with kindness. You could even have a conversation with them if you want. And always remember, if there's a threat, a specific threat to anyone or to yourself, call the freaking police. Don't play around with that. We love you guys, and we don't want you to be affected by the haters and trolls. So ban